All right, thank you guys so much. Good afternoon, and welcome to CSPC 2022. So my name is Sarah Laframboise, and this is Wendy Jo. I will start today off with the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the Canadian Science Policy Conference is taking place on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, whose presence here reaches back to time immemorial. We respect our traditional hosts and thank them for allowing us to operate on this land. I'm a PhD student in biochemistry at the University of Ottawa, so I'm also super honored to live, work, and play on this land as well. People come to CSPC from across Canada, in addition to across the world, and I encourage all of you to reflect on the land from which each of you come from. In addition to my graduate student work, I'm also the co-chair of the editorial committee, which has just produced the 4th edition of this beautiful CSPC magazine. I'm also the social media manager and graphic designer for CSPC, and together today here with my co-host Wendy and the rest of the CSPC staff and volunteers will be working tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure a safe journey for you guys over the next few days.
Merci Sarah. Bonjour à toutes et à tous.
Thank you, Sarah. Hello, everyone. As Sarah mentioned, I am Wendy, and we are very happy to welcome you to the 14th Canadian Science Policy Conference. In my daily work, and I'm a policy analyst at Health Canada, and with CSPC, I'm volunteer in program management.
The analyst for Health Canada, but moonlight for CSPC in my spare time as a volunteer and program manager for the awards and program committees and the Science Meets Parliament program. I'm very excited to be here today with Sarah to kick off the first in-person CSPC conference that we've had in 3 years and the first in-print CSPC magazine that we've had in 3 years.
And it's so great to finally meet you in person as well, Wendy. Like many of us over the past few years, we've mostly only met in virtual settings, so it's so great to see so many people for the first time in person. This is actually my second in-person conference, and in fact, at my first conference in 2019, you would have found me way back in the corner, sitting by myself, because I did not know a single person here. I came out of an interest in learning more about science policy as a student, and I'm so excited to be here today after working with CSPC for now 4 years, and so excited to see some now familiar faces in the crowd.
And to show them the beautiful new magazine. Cette année, le thème de...
This year, the topic of the conference is Navigating Uncertainty, Targeting Sustainability.
Targeting Sustainability. La conférence a...
This conference has a lot of subtopics: science, policy, science and society, innovation and economic development, science, international affairs and security, science and the next generation, and lastly, major challenges.
And within the themes, we have 60 panels, over 300 speakers, of which 58% of them are female, and one exceptionally beautiful magazine. In addition to all of our concurrent sessions, we have several plenaries and a few extra special sessions for you, such as the conversation with Minister Francois-Philippe Champagne, as well as a session with Canada's Chief Science Advisor, Dr. Mona Nimmer, and a presentation from the Canadian Research Coordinating Committee on their most recent report, which is coming up next.
As Sarah mentioned, there are many CSPC staff and volunteers involved in putting the conference together. Les bénévoles du comité de programme.
The volunteers of the program committee have organized all the panels for the conference, and the awards committee coordinated the various awards and prizes. So do not miss the unveiling of the prize winners during the gala dinner on Thursday.
Programming throughout the year, and the evaluations committee evaluates the success of our programs and initiatives, including this conference today. So make sure that you fill out your surveys. You will get lots of reminders.
Le comité de la science rencontre.
The science committee meets Parliament, and the subsidies committee is working to increase our capacity to do more special projects.
And finally, our editorial committee is responsible for publishing all of the editorial series throughout the year, and of course, again, this beautiful magazine.
So Sarah, you keep talking about this magazine. Where can I find it, and can you remind me how much it costs again?
Great question, Wendy. You can find free copies of this magazine by the registration desk, but you can also access a digital copy of this magazine on each of your apps just under the resources section on the side.
Well, we don't want to take up too much more of your magazine reading time, and we have lots of exciting panels upcoming. Without further ado, I would like to introduce the next session, which is discussing CRCC's progress report moving forward, moderated by Valérie Latraverse.
Merci à tous pour votre attention. Nous espérons que
Thank you for your attention. We hope that you will find this conference very interesting.
We hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Alors bonjour, ça me fait énormément plaisir.
So hello, it's a delight to see you today. Before I start, I would like to acknowledge that all our organization headquarters are located on the traditional headquarters unceded of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people.
And we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples and their ancestral rights from coast to coast. C'est un plaisir pour moi.
It's a pleasure for me today to present to you the coordinating the Canada Research Coordinating Committee and how the various agencies and federal departments collaborated to help support the enterprise of research in Canada over the last year.
Has a personal meaning for me, well, on a couple of levels. In 2007 or 2008, I'm not exactly sure, I met someone named Merdad in Washington, D.C. at a science policy conference, and he had this idea that he wanted to recreate the same thing in Canada. And so I am really just wanted to congratulate Merdad. I know it took a lot of perseverance, but it's great to see this idea turn into such a success. And I'm wearing my Canada jacket just to show we can do it like the Americans. And on the second point also, and I'll be brief, I was in the room about 10 years later, so about 5 years ago, when a group of experts came up with the idea of creating a coordinating committee. And so it's, again, an idea that turned into a very vital reality, as you'll hear today. So it's wonderful to be with these leaders. So I also want to thank the Secretariat for organizing. So Garth, who is the Executive Director of the CRCC, and Alice Hanlon, thank you very much for getting us organized today. So let me briefly introduce you to the panelists. I'll start with Francis Bilodeau, who's the Associate Deputy Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development, Canada. We also are expecting Stephen Lucas, the Deputy Minister of Health Canada. He'll be participating virtually. Alejandro Adem, the CRCC Chair and President of the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council, or NSERC. Tammy Clifford, Vice President, Research, Learning and Health Systems at the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, CIHR. Ted Hewitt, Vice Chair of the CRCC and President of the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, SHRC. We love acronyms in government. And Roseanne O'Reilly-Runt, President and CEO of the Canadian Foundation for Innovation, or CFI. And last but not least, Ian Stewart, President of the National Research Council. So the way this is going to work is that each panelist will speak for 5 minutes, one after the other, and we will then take questions once Ian Stewart has finished his opening remarks. We'll hopefully have at least a good half hour for Q&A, and I think there'll be someone walking around with a microphone when we get to that part. So I encourage you to think about questions or comments while the speakers are giving their opening remarks, and I'll be back after that. Avant de quitter, je voulais également vous
Before that, I wanted to also invite you to speak in the language of your choice.
On va commencer avec
So we will be starting
Dr. Adam,
with
the
Dr.
chair of the CRCC.
Adam.
Is it working? Yeah. My colleagues and I are delighted to open the in-person CSPC conference this year, particularly after, 2, 3, 4 years of virtual panels. La plénière du CCRC est devenue
The plenary of the CRCC has become a yearly event at the Canadian Science Policy Conference, and it is the fourth cycle of the CRCC. We recognize it is a great chance to exchange on the latest policy research.
participate in this panel both as the chair of CRCC for this year, as well as NSERC's president. For those who may not be as familiar with the acronyms and the efforts of the CRCC as others, the CRCC advances federal research priorities and the coordination of policies and programs of Canada's research funding agencies, the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council, the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, and the Canada Foundation for Innovation. It has become a strategic forum within government for sharing information, building consensus, and making decisions on forward-looking cross-cutting initiatives that strengthen Canada's research enterprise. Mes collègues et moi-même,
My colleagues and myself
le CCRC joue un rôle
can testify that this
dans l'approche
CRCC plays an essential role in this approach that enables us to reach our priority objectives of the government
des Canadiens.
for Canadians.
À cause de la dernière année, le CCRC
During the last year, the CRCC worked in several priority domains that aim to reach excellency in research in Canada.
of all Canadians is the foundation of research excellence in the 21st century. And our efforts in the areas of EDI, Indigenous research and reconciliation, interdisciplinary, high-risk, high-reward research, as well as focus on training early career researchers and international collaboration, serve to advance this mission. I'd like to provide you with a quick outline of the plenary format. Associate Deputy Minister Bilodeau and Deputy Minister Lucas, who's online, will provide a perspective on the government's continuing scientific response to the pandemic and efforts to move forward, building a more resilient, inclusive, and stronger Canada. After that, fellow panelists will report on what their organizations have accomplished together in support of and in alignment with our CRCC priorities as we move forward together. Following these remarks, all panelists look forward to questions and an opportunity to hear from delegates about issues of concern for the research enterprise moving forward. So I want to hand the floor over to Francis.
Thank you. And is my mic working? People can hear me all right? I guess first thing is it's really a pleasure to be here with people who care so deeply about science. It's important, and I think in the context we're living in, more important than ever. People may remember me from the session just on that side of a room about an hour ago. We were talking about the importance of transdisciplinary collaboration. I think it's more and more a fact of life that meeting today's challenges means we need to collaborate, and we need to collaborate across disciplines, and I think that'll be part of our discussion today. We've seen throughout this pandemic that an agile and well-connected research apparatus is really essential to meeting our challenges. On nous a rappelé à quel point c'est impératif.
It reminded us how much it's important to go beyond various disciplines and sector to guide scientific expertise, and a good national and international collaboration between the sectors is critical.
We recognize the importance of science, and we look to continue to work with all of you and to partner to advance a really important agenda. Recent investments and recent budget announcements actually highlight some of the areas of priorities. So in budget 2021, we saw that there was $2.2 billion over 7 years for biomanufacturing and life sciences. There's no doubt we can all agree this has to be a priority sector. It is an area that has been shown in need of investments. Those are going to be guided by the biomanufacturing and life science strategy. They'll include investments through le Fonds canadien de recherche biomédicale, qui va investir 205 millions par l'entreprise.
Through the three organizations subsidizing the Fund for Infrastructure for Research in Bioscience of an investment of 500 million, and the Fund for Clinical Trials. Altogether, those funds will finance 3 to 5 crossroads of research throughout the country.
So put a bit of an emphasis on areas we need to focus on for the future, areas of growth and areas of potential comparative advantage for Canada into the next decades. Those include AI, they include quantum science, genomics, and we're making progress on all of these strategies. So on the Pan-Canadian AI strategy that was launched, the National Quantum Strategy funding is starting to roll out, partly through the granting agencies and CERC, through the NRC, as well as government acting as a purchaser through the Innovation Solutions Canada program. Ensuite, le budget 2022.
Then budget 2022, we saw $38 million over 4 years for research in Canada.
And 40.9 million over 5 years pour les bourses d'études à la recherche ciblée à l'intention des chercheurs noirs. If I think it's true under our research apparatus, and it's true in society in general, if we want to succeed, we need everyone in society to have the equal opportunities. We need researchers and workers, independently of where they're coming from, to have the same opportunities. And it's an area we're investing in. Recently, people have also have seen the renewal of Mona Niemer's term, and so Mona was renewed for 2 years. Really important office, a really important advocate for science within the federal government. We're happy to be able to work with her, and we're really happy that she's agreed to renew the mandate for another 2 years. My minister will be here later, and you'll get to hear directly from him. But our minister, in collaboration with the Minister of Health, was also mandated to develop a plan to modernize the federal research support to maximize the impact of investments. Et par conséquent, on a lancé le mois dernier le comité consultatif sur le système fédéral de soutien à la recherche. Been assisting those meetings, and really they are advancing well, and we're gaining really important insight. Afin de formuler ces conseils, le comité sollicite les intervenants et des experts tant.
Committee is calling upon experts in Canada and abroad.
If you have used to submit them through our website, and we encourage people to do this. We want to have sort of a broad-based discussion, broad-based input, so that we can make the best recommendations we can to the government. But before maybe I wrap up my remarks, I really want to highlight the work of the CRCC to advance priorities that are vital to us, vital to the modern research enterprise. In particular, I also want to highlight some of the work around advancing equity, diversity, and inclusion that's been led by the committee. I'll end there, et puis je vais passer la parole to my colleague online, Stephen Lucas, Deputy Minister of Health.
That's great. Thank you, Francis and Alejandro, Valerie, and thank you for inviting me today. I wish I was there in person. It's a very busy time, and unfortunately, I won't be able to join you for questions. Mais je voudrais vous présenter quelques pensées sur 3 thèmes. Premièrement, quelques leçons apprises de la pandémie qui évidemment continuent et qui touchent en particulier sur le rôle de la science. Deuxièmement, l'approche à Santé Canada d'augmenter notre collaboration et un dialogue autour le ministère en ce qui concerne la science. Et troisièmement, l'importance de cibler les efforts sur l'équité, la diversité et de l'inclusion. So first, I'll share just a couple of reflections on the pandemic, 5 key lessons in particular, which I think draw on the critical role of science, the role of CRC, but more broadly, collaboration across the government of Canada, with provinces and territories, with researchers across the country, and indeed globally, that were all instrumental to our response to date. The first is the importance of staying on top of emerging science. And in one way, it's a very simple lesson, but critically important in the context of the pandemic. As we know from in the early days, understanding how the virus was transmitted and public health measures to address that, to recognizing the incredible power of new vaccine platforms, and specifically the mRNA one, and the speed of development of those. And thirdly, the role of genomics in particular in helping to fingerprint variants of concern, and combined with epidemiological, clinical, vaccination, and other data, really better address our public health response and contribute globally to the understanding of the pandemic and its evolutionary arc. And here I would like to recognize the critical roles played by Dr. Theresa Tam as Chief Public Health Officer and Dr. Mona Niemer as the Chief Science Advisor in helping working with us federally and colleagues across the country in terms of translating that emerging understanding of the pandemic and the nature of response, including on the side of vaccination, to advice to the governments and really affecting that critical bridge that your conference focuses on in terms of science and policy. The second point, and closely related to it, is the critical importance of speed and agility. I think we all saw times where we were successful as a country and as governments and individuals in reacting quickly and in the face of uncertainty and challenges that accrued where that wasn't the case, or there was where there was a diversity of approaches. We saw the critical importance of, for example, understanding the impacts in long-term care and seeking to strengthen infection prevention and control and other measures to help our most vulnerable elderly people in that care, as we saw the impact in the spring of 2020. We also saw the power of modeling applied and the work on scenario planning in partnership with NSERC, CIHR, and others across the country as we looked ahead and were better prepared as the pandemic evolved to respond to different scenarios and the emergence of different variants through that forward-looking work. Thirdly, collaboration and partnerships really underpinned our response, including the extraordinary effort across governments with researchers and all Canadians in the vaccination campaign, where we came together in truly a national whole of society project, and through critical partnerships to support communities across the country, be they Indigenous, racialized communities, faith communities, youth, others to join in the effort. The partnership with industry, I think, was critically important. Francis mentioned it, supporting now looking ahead biomanufacturing, but for example, production and importantly, deployment and use of rapid tests, working with chambers of commerce, pharmacies, Canadian Red Cross, and other partners in the pandemic. The fourth point I'll touch on is the importance not only of having a strong effort in supporting research, for example, through the work of CIHR's rapid response funding and the contributions from the CRCC, but importantly, coordinating that, recognizing support provided through the Canadian Immunity Task Force, the Variants of Concern Network, or COVARNet. And we've taken a variety of steps to strengthen that research coordination, including through a federal pandemic research coordination action group that's helping to bring together federal funding players to ensure that we can have maximum impact and address key mission-focused challenges. And I think this will be an important reflection for the future as we think about our future pandemic preparedness. And the final point I'll raise is on the importance of looking at health inequities. We saw a disproportionate impact in the most vulnerable communities across the country, including racialized Canadians, Indigenous peoples, New Canadians, and those who are economically disadvantaged, as well as homeless populations. And I think this provides a real beacon that shines on challenges that we knew that were further amplified in the pandemic, and that must form a basis for work from our research through to health system support and access. Donc, ce sont 5 leçons apprises et mes réflexions sur les 5. Je voudrais tourner maintenant brièvement à l'utilisation de la science à Santé Canada, recognizing that at the heart of our response was the talent and talented workforce we have here and talent across the country, which were mobilized in great numbers to help with the pandemic response, but as well the many other pressing priorities we have in the health sector. In terms of a concurrent exercise at Health Canada, we did look to strengthen science awareness and engagement and integration with our decision-making over the course of the pandemic. And here I'll recognize the leadership of Dr. Kara Tannenbaum, our departmental science advisor, in helping work to shape an updated science framework, and importantly, an employee-led and driven science and research integration network, which has really elevated the dialogue and I think pushed leaders and policy analysts and executives across the department to better recognize the need for and the role of scientists and science in our work here at Health Canada. I'll just conclude with a couple of brief comments on equity, diversity, and inclusion in science, and I know other colleagues will touch on these themes. One, just to note, this is a major focus broadly in Health Canada and across the Government of Canada, but importantly in targeted areas as we look at it in terms of our decision-making and science. For example, in further working on sex and gender-based analysis in the broader intersectionality context, in, for example, our regulatory functions, recognizing the need, as we saw in the pandemic, for disaggregated data to understand the impacts on individual populations, such as in clinical trial data, as well as in how we conduct and report on research. Secondly, we have dedicated a focus on anti-racism and science as part of our broader work on tackling racism in the department, looking at principles and practices, methodologies of how we conduct science, as well as ensuring a diverse science workforce. And finally, looking at the role of Indigenous peoples in Indigenous traditional knowledge and science, emphasizing the importance of multiple ways of seeing, supporting, and growing our Indigenous workforce, and strengthening those critical partnerships in key domains as we look to support the health and safety of Canadians. So with that, I think I pass it on to Tammy next.
Thank you. I think it comes over to me. Thank you very much, Stephen. I appreciate your remarks. So I'm going to be taking off my CRCC hat a little bit and talking as from the point of view of NSERC somewhat. So I want to touch upon EDI first, a very important topic. Certainly we want to attract the best people and ensure that everyone who wants to pursue a research career, who has the potential to make important and meaningful contributions, feels comfortable and welcomed into the fold. In the
context of our efforts to sustain excellence in research, we have to recognize the large inventory of contributions that contribute to the dynamics of our research and research systems. It's important that contributions in the area of training and mentorship be taken into consideration and valued in the process of evaluating merit. The federal financing organizations have signed the San Francisco Declaration on the Evaluation of Research, DORA, in 2019. And to follow up on this engagement, we reviewed the guidelines for the evaluation of contributions to research, to training and mentorship. So the revised guidelines will make sure that we integrate the principles of DORA by taking into account the larger context of contributions, especially in the area of awareness raising and mentorship, without
Now, a key step in formulating effective EDI policies is to base it on data that helps identify the barriers faced by various sections of the population in accessing research funding. CRCC members have rolled out expanded self-ID questionnaires to collect more granular, disaggregated data applicants and peer review committee members. This will help us understand where systemic barriers exist and how to design equitable and inclusive programs that support the full and fair participation of all members of the research community. The Tri-Agency EDI Action Plan for 2018-2025 was published with the objectives of ensuring fair access to tri-agency research support and equitable participation in the research ecosystem. This summer, we launched the Answer Guide on integrating equity, diversity, and inclusion considerations in research to help NSC researchers apply a critical equity, diversity, and inclusion lens in their work by providing guiding questions and examples relevant to their field of research. D'autre part, nous avons commencé cet automne.
And this fall, we launched a pilot program called Dimensions, and we also subsidized the reinforcing of the capacity of institutions in the area of equity, diversity, and inclusion, and with the possibility of pilot financing. We are interested in identifying initiatives that will allow us to ensure equity, diversity, and accessibility within various research environments.
The tri-agency training strategy that has been developed at CRCC. CRCC recognizes the increasingly precarious circumstances faced by many graduate students and postdoctoral fellows. The tri-agencies are developing a training strategy with a vision of creating a more equitable, accessible, and effective suite of direct funding support programming for our next generation of research leaders. Budget 2022 announced support for Black scholars, which will be implemented by the tri-agencies through their scholarships and fellowships programs in the coming year. Lorsque nous considérons les besoins de la main-d'œuvre de demain,
as we continue to prepare for the recruitment of tomorrow's workforce, we are sensitive to the importance of providing training opportunities in research in all sectors, not just the university sector. And so this means that the NSERC maintains a close link with the research community. We are conscious that students are confronted with financial difficulties, and as a result, a great number of them are faced with an increase in cost of living, which prevents them from pursuing higher studies. So we will extend our cooperation and implement the strategy to make sure that these students have benefit from the support that they need to be able to pursue their doctoral studies and at higher learning institutions.
And talented pool to research and preparing them for a broad range of career paths post-graduation is what will sustain a thriving economy. In fact, I'm fond of saying research equal talent. This will also bolster Canadian scientific culture, fortifying Canada's position globally. I'm sure there'll be much more to say about this topic in the question session. Next, I want to touch on international collaboration. As we know, excellent research is almost by definition international. Now, recognizing the heightened importance of international collaboration in an increasingly interconnected world facing global challenges, CRCC members helped broaden Canada's global research and innovation networks in 2021-2022 by collectively engaging with international research funding organizations to share information and perspectives on the drivers of national and global research agendas and discuss potential areas for cooperation. Au cours de la dernière année,
Over the last year, the committee, the Research Coordination Committee of Canada, met with other organizations and agencies. We met with the French institution, German institutions, and UK Research and Innovation, et la National Science Foundation in the United States. So the National Science Foundation signed an MOU with NSERC to subsidize fundamental research in the United States and Canada, to bolster research. And in the UK Centre for Innovation and Research held a joint conference on equity and diversity and inclusion. And so we want to promote equity, diversity, and inclusion within the research ecosystem. My colleague Tag will talk to us about the initiative against climate change, which will be administered by the Secretariat. At NSERC, we promote this kind of cooperation with other international financing or funding institutions.
Research Council, I'm pleased to serve as vice chair of this multilateral forum where we compare notes with funding agencies around the world. In fact, right now in Montevideo, NSERC is co-hosting the Americas Regional Meeting together with the National Funding Council of Uruguay. There will be some 15 countries from the Americas represented, and we will be considering the 2 GRC thematics for this year: climate change and recognition and rewards for researchers. Through these and many more engagements, the CRCC and its members will be building trusted relationships and understanding what underpins international collaboration. I want to now turn it over to my colleague, Tammy Clifford.
Thanks very much, Alejandro. And
Merci beaucoup, Alejandro. Et je suis très heureux de...
chair, from which you've been running meetings for the past 2.5 years. And it's wonderful to see you as well. Bon après-midi à vous too. Most certainly, our world has changed since the last time that CSPC met here in person. And so it is an appropriate time to gather and to take stock of how the CRCC has strengthened Canada's COVID-19 response and recovery. As the federal funding agency responsible for investing in health research, CIHR has been central to Canada's response to COVID-19. Les IRC ont été le premier organisme national.
We were the first national organization to fund research in health in the world. And there was an open contest to subsidize research during the pandemic.
Over $400 million in close to 1,000 COVID-19 related research projects across a variety of essential research areas, everything from diagnostics to vaccines to public health responses and communication strategies. In January of this year, the Government of Canada announced the creation of a Centre for Research on Pandemic Preparedness and Health Emergencies. And this centre, which is housed within CIHR, works with partners across the CRCC and beyond in order to support sustained and coordinated research activities to ensure that Canada is able to prevent, prepare for, respond to, and recover from existing and future pandemics and public health emergencies. As reflected in the CIHR strategic plan from a couple of years ago, and as mentioned by Alejandro, we are placing a strong focus on inclusive research excellence, Les CRCC travaillent à l'élaboration
So we are working on the development of a new concept of excellence in research.
areas where we are already valuing diverse research approaches and impacts. But we certainly recognize that there are other places where we have much work to do. And we look forward to engaging with you and the broader research community as we make strides in this area. As an integral component of this work, we too continue to further our implementation of the San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment, or DORA, including enhanced guidance, again, for applicants and for peer reviewers coming this spring for CIHR. And with regard to the CRC's initiatives around equity, diversity, and inclusion, we too are pleased to report progress to strengthen EDI in the research ecosystem in Canada through a number of strategies. I am very pleased to note that CIHR has created a dedicated equity strategy branch. Grâce à cette branche dédiée, les IRSC.
So we will continue to launch and sustain a certain number of measures to improve inclusion, diversity, and equity and accessibility.
The CRCC's, Health Canada's, and other federal partners' efforts to support health systems transformation with the ultimate goal of health equity for all. Also mentioned by Alejandro, CIHR has launched an expanded self-identification questionnaire for applicants and a new self-identification questionnaire for peer reviewers this year. These questionnaires will provide us with data so important for us to understand where systemic barriers exist and how we can design and implement programs and policies that will support, again, the full and fair participation of all members of the health research community. Certainly, over the last year, we've continued to learn about the challenges and barriers communities impacted by racism experience when engaging with CIHR. In June of last year, we established an anti-racism external advisory committee. Ce comité avait pour mandat d'éclairer les...
This committee had as its mandate to ensure that we to look at the situation of the communities that were impacted by racism in the context of the pandemic and take corrective measures.
Advisory committee have informed a series of small group virtual engagement sessions in which individuals from communities impacted by racism participated in discussions on issues, challenges, and solutions to address systemic racism in CIHR's funding system. Work is now underway to further engage with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities on the topic of systemic racism. Our goal here is to ensure the unique rights, interests, and circumstances of Indigenous peoples are acknowledged, affirmed, and implemented. Tous les commissaires sont
All of these deliberations will be taken into account and integrated into an action plan that we hope to publish in 2023.
This year, we also established an external advisory committee on accessibility and systemic ableism to advise on barriers to accessibility within our funding system and to develop an accessibility and systemic ableism action plan in alignment with the requirements of the Accessible Canada Act. This work engaged persons with disabilities and experienced allies, including small group virtual discussion sessions, where ways to identify, remove, and prevent barriers to accessibility were discussed. This also includes the launch of 2 anonymous surveys in fall 2022, and these surveys are still open at this point in time, one targeted to persons with disabilities, and the other for people who are in their support networks. Again, so that we can understand where those barriers exist Merci pour votre temps.
Thank you for your time and attention.
A lot of information to digest, but we wanted to take an opportunity to highlight them, to again underscore the CRC's commitment to improve equity, diversity, and inclusion. Nous sommes convaincus qu'on
We are convinced that by taking into account various viewpoints, ideas, and approaches, all the parties at this table will be able to promote excellence in research to better meet the needs of the population and the diversity of Canada.
over to you, Ted.
Okay. Thanks, Tammy. Bonjour, collègues. It's great to be here this afternoon to see so many of you in person and to be here with my agency colleagues, some of whom I haven't seen in quite a long time. So happy 3D day to all of us. It's a really quiet crowd. I'm a sociologist, so what does that mean? I wonder. So, maybe it's because we sit in front of screens for so long and there's nobody to talk to. I see Roseanne admonishes her dog quite a bit because it's playing with its toy. It's a little nasty, but here we have to be more civil. But it's okay. You can kind of look at each other, have a little chat. So I'm happy to provide a few comments. I want to focus primarily on areas in which CRCC has been working and with respect to interdisciplinarity and international research. Secondly, with respect to climate change, because as Alejandro said, this is really big for us, important. And Indigenous research. Of course, I'm going to talk about SSHRC, but primarily within the context of these broader CRCC initiatives, if that's okay. And certainly SSHRC to begin with, and the CRCC recognize very clearly the importance of providing opportunities for researchers to work together as part of our mandate, across disciplines, across sectors, but also across borders. And this is really, as we all know, vital to addressing global challenges, seizing opportunities, energizing Canada's science and innovation system. The New Frontiers in Research Fund, which is administered by SSHRC, but on behalf of CRCC, supports Canadian-led international and interdisciplinary research with the potential to create real and lasting change. And of all the funds in Canada, as I travel from university to university to university, this is the fund that's creating the most buzz currently in terms of what it's designed to do and what it's delivering in terms of research, which is out of the box, higher risk, bringing forward new opportunities, international. So, depuis 2018, le fonds a attribué.
Since 2018, the fund has granted more than 500 subsidies to researchers at the beginning of their career. And we have the transformation stream. So 144,000 was given to 7 interdisciplinary projects that call into question the present paradigms, propose innovative approaches, and also could have unforeseen impacts. So they deal with new ways of repairing medullary lesions, DNA research, studies on the modification of the biosphere, and improvements of the workplace, and the situation of handicapped people, just to mention a few.
Change, and Alejandro had mentioned this earlier, and this is creating a lot of buzz as well, not just in Canada, but around the world, increasingly across continents. CRCC fundamentally understands that international and interdisciplinary research is a crucial element of the world's efforts to address climate change. We're currently developing an international joint initiative on climate change adaptation and mitigation research that will be delivered through the NFRF. The initiative will target interdisciplinary and transsectoral research with a requirement for community involvement that will have tangible impact on communities most affected by and particularly vulnerable to climate change. The international call will launch this coming January. It'll include a public policy forum at the end of the grants to further knowledge sharing and mobilization and encouraging continuing research and collaborations. And again, to emphasize, this is a partnership between Canada and a number of other countries in Africa, in Europe, in Latin America, and beyond. This is really a first for Canada and one where we're exercising significant leadership. La science des changements climatiques
The science of climate change is concentrated on natural science and health sciences. However, as we've mentioned in the report, it's urgent to start research in the social aspects of climate change because scientists have an important role to play in our study of this area, of this problem. And because it's essential to understand how we can influence and bring about changes in human behavior.
In terms of how to ensure multidisciplinary approaches to grand challenges such as climate change. I want to talk a little bit about Indigenous research as well. Fostering Indigenous self-determination, leadership, and capacity in research and training has been, from the very beginning, a CRCC priority. We're learning to embrace Indigenous ways of knowing as these knowledge systems continue to be revitalized. And this transformation may sometimes challenge, as we all know, Western-trained researchers, such as many of us, but it opens new opportunities to reframe and to reimagine our responses to global challenges. In 2022, we released our first progress report on the implementation of the, do you want to have a look? The weather test.
This is just a test.
The weather test, there is weather. So we don't need to test that. Okay. In 2022, we released the first progress report on the implementation of the Interagency Strategic Plan on Indigenous Research and Research Training titled Building the Foundation. The report highlights the importance of building a community of Indigenous scholars, community leaders, knowledge keepers, elders, and youth who would guide the implementation of the Interagency Collaborative Strengthening Indigenous Research Capacity Initiative. In collaboration with Indigenous partners, the federal research granting agencies reached another major milestone by establishing the Indigenous Leadership Circle in Research. Composed of individuals from First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities, the Leadership Circle will oversee implementation of the plan and advise the agencies on matters related to Indigenous research. It has had its first in-person meeting, at which I was very pleased to attend at Blue Quills University in northeastern Alberta, just, I believe, 2 short weeks ago, and in which the committee started to undertake its very important work. Individually and collectively across agencies, we're starting to move towards the implementation of specific programming as a result. Par exemple, nous avons établi un
For example, we established a partnership with the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation that will allow us to sustain reconciliation efforts through research and answer the Call to Action 65 of the Commission. On September 1st, 2 agencies, research agencies, launched a pilot initiative to offer a supplement or top-up for university graduates, Aboriginal students who want to pursue masters in social sciences or natural sciences and engineering.
Of importance, and I very much look forward to the discussion that we'll be having a little bit later. Thank you. And I'll turn over, je vais passer le bâton à toi, madame.
So I'll turn it over to you now, dear colleague. It's really a pleasure to be here with you today and to think about the future, reflect on the future and what it can hold for us. Of course, we never know.
We do know that science does hold the key to the future. And when I say science, I mean all sciences and all ways of finding knowledge. They are the keys to the future, solving the problems that will arise, because that we do know is that the world will continue having problems. But we also know that science and research will open the door to new possibilities. And we also know that those new possibilities are there when we work together. And the CRCC is not just programs. It's about people working together, making it possible for researchers across the country to work together. Ted talked about the work they've done with the Institute for Peace and Reconciliation. And the CFI has provided equipment and ability to digitize what's available. So together we make something really good happen for the country. It's about collaboration. It's about collaboration that goes beyond the people sitting at this table. It includes all the researchers across the country and their students. It also includes industry and not-for-profits and provincial governments. We are all stronger when everybody works together. So this is a really wonderful opportunity for us to enhance the collaboration that happens. We also know that we don't live in a Canadian vacuum. Il y a un grand monde autour de nous.
We live in a wide world, and the problems of the world are problems that we share in all countries. The environmental problems, health problems, peace problems, economic problems. And if we work with other countries, it can be done through the Coordination Research Committee. And I'm pleased to say that the Canadian Foundation for Innovation has contributed to a program that will guide us.
A format, a framework for international engagement to the CRCC, and we did it with researchers in all of the fields. Everybody was involved, including my good colleague at the NRC, and we continue that work on international, so it is a whole community project.
During the pandemic, we saw that everybody had to work together. Institutions, researchers, students, everyone pivoted.
Pandemic, and they started thinking that the problem that faced society was everybody's problem, and that we all had a part of the problem. And it was incredible to see that everybody across the country owned part of the solution. In Calgary, they provided hand sanitizer for the whole city of Calgary in the labs at the university. Art McDonald, the Nobel laureate in physics, working with neutrinos, stopped and with a group of colleagues created a respirator, a ventilator that enabled people to, you could build it anywhere in the world with parts off the shelf. They gave up the patent. They gave it to the people of the world. I see that's really great. Look at McMaster University, inhalable vaccines that will actually go to the root of the problem if it is in our lungs. And we're all ready to do that again. I know that universities and colleges and hospitals and industry will come together and work when we have a problem. We're doing it again today with the BRIF, le programme.
The bio-research program, everybody's working together on that one, is to make sure that the next time that we're confronted with a health emergency, we will have the facilities, the science that's needed to respond even more quickly to the challenge.
To everybody across the country, there are issues that everybody agrees on. We all agree the environment is important, health is important. We all agree that we have to reach into outer space and look at what is out there in the planets, even though we have a lot of problems to solve on Earth. We have a lot to do. We also know that all of those problems need data, and we share common problems. And those are things that together, all of the institutions, les trois conseils, le Centre national de recherche, qu'on peut tous venir ensemble.
And we can all come together to try and provide to the needs of researchers.
We also need to look out at the future. And at the CFI, we did a survey of 1,500 young people across the country. And they said to us that they believe in science. They want to be scientists. And when I say scientists, I mean they want to have a career in research, whether it's social sciences, philosophy, or in engineering and medicine. They want to do that. This is wonderful. They want their governments to make science-based decisions. That's even better, probably. Or maybe they're competing in the amount of goodness that they are. But when you hear that, you hear the word hope.
In the case of SSHRC, our knowledge synthesis grants, or in events, one of the ones we've had for many years now that Valerie knows very well is with Global Affairs Canada, which is a policy ideas challenge, where we bring students, early career researchers to Ottawa to sit down with Global Affairs Canada officials to talk about, where Canada's foreign policy is going or it should go. So we think this is super important, like to bring these folks, to bring you, here to Ottawa or wherever decision makers are, in order to directly contribute to those decision-making activities. So we want to do more of that, as we go forward.
So I don't know who was first, but if you could stay, does anyone else need to go? You need to go. Okay. So maybe we can ask the questions at the conclusion of the session, but since you had your hand up, I will.
Who?
Mario Pinto.
Ted, you spoke very eloquently about the New Frontiers of Research Fund and the original intent to embrace bold, high-risk ideas and to really push the boundaries. And that was the intent. And we were together when we made the pitch as we went across Canada. The fact that you now allocated 20%, or you intend to allocate 20% of the NFRF to international initiatives, does that signal that the research community in Canada has not been bold enough? Are we still too risk averse? So hand on your heart, tell me the truth.
I'm going to say no.
Okay.
And the reason is that we'd always anticipated allocating around 20% of that fund to international activities. And a big part of that has been in supporting applications and submissions with partners in Europe to Horizon Europe. And that work will continue for now. And of course, the climate change initiative, Mario, also comes from that envelope. So we're going to do both. And it's a question of the mix and the kinds of things we will do. So we said so Horizon Europe, that's about anything. Work with colleagues in Europe to secure Horizon Europe funding. Climate change is about climate change. And that's part of the envelope. Exploration is about anything you like, that's out of the box, that's higher risk, the kind of crazy things that you would think no agency would ever fund. That's the stuff we want for that. So I think we're pretty clear on that. So I don't think that signals any sort of shift or change in our thinking. It's just the gradual and evolutionary implementation of the funding within that entire NFREF envelope, which was always planned and always had intended as the amounts ramp up and have finally reached their full stage. So that's how I would answer that, Mario. We can talk later.
I guess I'm linking to the previous comment on social sciences-led projects and the fact that if we really embrace that strategy in Canada, we wouldn't necessarily have to bring in international partners. So perhaps we should take pride in what we have at home.
And we'll continue to support and fund those projects, absolutely, through our regular programming and through some of the other multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary measures that we've developed, such as the tri-agency interdisciplinary peer review process and so forth. So, absolutely.
So Alejandro Adem has to leave. So I think we'll conclude the session. And if you do have questions, I apologize for the wait, but maybe you could just come up to the panel and pose your questions. Did you have a closing remark, Alejandro, or?
You're doing a good job. I really liked your comments.
Thanks to everyone for coming, for your interest. We look forward to hearing from you on a personal basis. This is very helpful for us. And as Ian said, this is work in progress. Thank you very much.
Merci à tous.